It was supposed to be a joke, a cute little thing for our daughter's school project, an online DNA test to help her fill in a family tree, but when the results came back, they didn't just tell me where my ancestors were from, they told me my husband wasn't my daughter's father, and that was the moment my whole world came apart. Mark and I had been married for 8 years. We had a 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, our sunshine. Saturday mornings were pancake days. Mark flipped them while Sophie sat at the kitchen island drawing on placemats with crayons. He'd make a little pancake shaped like a heart and pretend it was magic just for her. Evenings were for stories. Sophie would curl up on his lap, insist he do the funny voices for her favorite book. He always did. He could make her laugh until she hiccuped. We weren't perfect, we argued sometimes about bills or schedules, but we always made up quickly. At least, I thought we did. Every now and then, someone would comment, "Sophie's got such unique features, doesn't really look like either of you." We'd laugh it off. Mark would joke, "She's just one of a kind." Those moments never stayed with me for long. But looking back now, I realize they stayed with him. One night, Sophie came home from school excited. Her class was doing a family tree project, and she needed to list relatives and where they came from. I said, "We should do one of those ancestry DNA kits. Make it more fun." Mark grinned. "Sure, maybe I'll find out I'm descended from Vikings." We ordered the kits that night. When they arrived, we made a game of it. Sophie loved spitting into the little tube, she thought it was hilarious. We sealed the packages and dropped them in the mailbox together. For the first week, we joked about the results. But then I noticed Mark wasn't joking anymore. I caught him late at night on his laptop, reading articles about DNA tests. One was titled, "When a DNA test reveals you're not the father." I laughed. "You think there's some surprise coming?" He didn't laugh. He just closed the laptop and said, "Just curious." A few days later, during breakfast, I caught him watching Sophie, really watching her. Not with his usual warm smile, but like he was searching her face for answers. When I asked if something was wrong, he said, "Just tired." But his eyes told a different story. 6 years ago, before Sophie was born, our marriage hit a rough patch. We were both stressed, money was tight, I was working long hours, and Mark felt like I didn't have time for him. We fought a lot. One night, the fight got so bad, I packed a bag and left for a few days to stay with a friend. During that time, I went out with coworkers. There was a man named Daniel, charming, funny. We had too much to drink, one thing led to another, and it happened. I told myself it was a meaningless mistake. I never saw him again. 2 weeks later, Mark and I made up. We promised to start fresh. When I found out I was pregnant, I didn't think twice. The timing was close enough that I convinced myself Sophie was his. I buried that night deep in my memory, determined it would never come out. But now, waiting for the DNA results, that night started creeping back into my thoughts in ways I didn't want to admit. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when the email came. I was making tea when my laptop pinged. "Your DNA results are ready." I opened mine first, mostly Irish, some Italian. No surprises, then I clicked Sophie's. It matched mine well enough until I got to the parent/child relationship section. Instead of confirmed parent, it said, "No direct biological relationship detected." I blinked. Read it again. Refreshed the page, same result. My stomach dropped. My hands were shaking so badly I almost spilled my tea. At first, I told myself it was a glitch. Maybe she'd swapped spit tubes. Maybe the lab made a mistake, but the more I stared at the words, the more they burned into my brain. I sat frozen for an hour, just scrolling up and down the page. Willing it to change, it didn't, and when Mark walked in the door that evening, one look at my face told him I knew. I didn't say anything right away. Sophie ran to hug him, and he scooped her up, kissed her hair, held her tighter than usual. We sat down to dinner, Sophie chattering about her school project, me pushing food around my plate, Mark barely touching his. Every time I looked at him, he was looking at Sophie. His eyes were soft but sad. Halfway through the meal, I realized he'd been preparing for this, and that's when I knew he already knew. Later that night, after Sophie was in bed, I finally spoke. I saw the results, I said quietly. Mark didn't react. He just stared at the table. I've wondered since the day she was born, he said finally. He told me about the little things, her hair color, her eyes, the comments from relatives. How he laughed them off in public but replayed them in private. I tried to speak, to deny it, but my throat closed, and then I confessed. About the break. About Daniel. About the night I'd worked so hard to forget. Mark didn't yell. He didn't call me names, he just sat there, tears in his eyes, and said, "She's my daughter. But you're not the person I thought you were." And that somehow hurt more than if he'd screamed. That night, he moved into the guest room. Within a month, he'd rented an apartment. We didn't tell Sophie the full truth, just that Mommy and Daddy would be living in different houses. She cried and clung to him. He promised he'd still see her every weekend, and he does. He's still dad to her. He still goes to her soccer games, still reads her bedtime stories when she's at his place, but between us there's nothing left. 6 months later, I'm in therapy, trying to untangle the guilt from the grief. Sometimes I imagine a life where we never took that DNA test. Where the secret stayed buried forever. Maybe we'd still be together. Maybe Sophie would still have us both under one roof, but the truth doesn't care what you want. It shows up uninvited sometimes in a neat little email on a rainy Thursday, and once you see it, you can't unsee it.